Hello, everyone. Welcome to Overtime. My name is Nicholas Lamar Suter, and with me today is Commander Lance McMillan. We're trying to connect with Operator Starsky. We are in contact with him at this very moment. He is trying to connect to the show. His Starlink is repeatedly dropping him, so he's having Starlink issues. We've asked him to keep trying for, say, maybe the next half hour or so. The show normally runs an hour. If he can't get in another half hour, it's probably best to try to save this for another time. A few housekeeping things just to let people know. He is going to be on the Enforcers tonight, assuming Starlink cooperates. So that's going to be another opportunity for you to see him. And if I understand correctly, they are doing a stream for Doctors Without Borders. That's going to be the charity here. And let me put up let's see, there we go. So we're going to put that up, that comment up. It's also pinned, so I think that's great. Doctors Without Borders, we don't usually discuss, I don't like to discuss charity organizations for any number of reasons. We do all of our shows, all of our super chats, in which Starsky is a participant, or is supposed to be a participant, today included, goes to the charity of his choice. He has asked that we donate to the Vetra Volunteer Organization. That the information for that charity is in the bottom of the description, so you can see where we're donating. That is at his request. But we actually don't usually get involved in donations for any number of reasons, which we'll discuss some other time when it's more relevant, with the exception of the International Committee for the Red Cross and Doctors Without Borders. These are two spectacular organizations. If you are looking for a way to try to help, there are other organizations that I am a fan of personally, but we don't on the show usually endorse those. Doctors Without Borders and the International Committee for the Red Cross are two that this show, as a show, does in fact wholeheartedly endorse. So we are happy to shill his appearance there, and we're happy to shill anything he does. Speaking of shilling, he's going to be on the shills tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern, so we'll try to get those links to you. Let me see in a minute. I don't have those links. Then Titan can drop those links in a few minutes. So please go check out those channels, see that, support their content as well. It really helps. I say this when I'm on the shills. It helps immensely when you like, share, and subscribe. If you like a channel, if you like the content they're doing those things helps us in the algorithm. It helps us to promote our own channels, and it's free. So it's a great way to help out. You can also become a patron, supporter, super chat, and or any number of ways to help out a show. But there's one that's real easy. You hit the like and the subscribe button here on In Time right now, because we are adding another channel. We're going to do all the same content, but certain kinds of content, mostly interviews and stuff like that, is being moved to Overtime. All our news content, breaking news, and specifically news discussion is going to be on In Time. This show right here, right now, is on both, because it is kind of both, and we know our audience that likes either is a fan of having Starsky on. But if you can go to the Overtime channel, like and subscribe there, help us as we build that channel, that would be a huge help. So that's just one way you can help us out, and we really appreciate it. So if you can take a minute to do that, we would appreciate that a great deal. Thank you all very much for that. So as I said, we are in contact with Starsky right now, and he is working on getting in, and we hope to have him for you. He's in a war zone. So, and I say this every time we have this problem, which is he apologizes for not connecting. He's just like, I'm so sorry. I'm just like, and one time he was literally like, the sirens were going off and there were rockets over. He's like, I'm just trying to listen for where these are. And I'm just like, okay, put down the camera and get into a bunker. I was like, we're okay. I appreciate that you're coming on the show, but so he certainly does. He tries his best to come on, and we sincerely appreciate that. So, 𝐒𝐤𝐿𝐴 𝐬𝐿.
I had an nickel for every time somebody told me they were being shelled. Come on.
Well, you actually might have an excuse. You've been in the military. You probably have met people who've been shelled before. Let's just say in high school I couldn't use that excuse. It would have been better than the dog ate it, but I couldn't.
That's what's bizarre for me is 25 years in the military, never shelled once, but I was in air raids when I was a kid living in India.
So as the son of a diplomat, you
Yeah.
were diplomat in quotes, air quotes, as
Very
the son
large air quotes.
as the son of a diplomat, you were under more fire than you were as when you were actually in the military, U.S. military.
Yeah.
So and we've talked about Musk before. I think that I'm thank you. Your channels confuse me, but I'll get it with time. Yeah, we basically it's always been one channel called In Time, but it's done both interviews and news, and we just realized that a lot of people who love the interviews but don't like the news, and then there were people who love the news but don't like the interviews. And the interviews that aren't news related but are educational in one way or another. So, well, that's it. We've created another channel, the sort of educational, much more evergreen stuff that isn't really necessarily, breaking news or happening right now, but is still worth knowing and discussing. We've been discussing problems specifically with news media. Sometimes we'll discuss psychology, human propensity for how we gather information and do it incorrectly. And I think it's all appropriate to In Time, but it's actually stuff that the people who really follow us for the news don't like. And it was just better for everybody, especially our audience, to split it, and then you only get notifications on the stuff you want to see. But that means then we have to basically start another channel from scratch, and we have to get it to 1,000 subs as quickly as possible so that A, it's monetized, and B, it has all the features that In Time has, and the channels can work together. And then you subscribe to both if you like both, or just one if you like one. There were plenty of people who were like, oh, we love talking psychology, but, why are you doing this breaking news stuff? So we're like, okay, we'll make everybody happy, 2 separate channels. That's the deal. But since the other channel is still really growing, we're plugging it, and then once it's to 1,000, we're gonna not merge them so much because it confuses people, most of all me. So we'll get on that. So at any rate, as I said, we are waiting on Starsky, but until then, I think there's a lot to discuss. I was talking about Musk. And I don't like the guy for any number of reasons, some of them just personal. There are ways in which just the way he talks, the way he acts, really gets on my nerves and has for a very long time. And others much more professional. I don't appreciate certain views and how he's operating his business and what he's doing with it. But all that notwithstanding, I think he's more motivated by money and influence and being the cool kid in the room than he is a hatred of Ukraine or anything like that. I don't think he cares about Ukraine one iota, and I'm not convinced that he didn't just donate all the Starlink stuff to Ukraine so that he could build the DoD later, which is exactly what he tried to do. I don't think that was out of the blue, so I think he was trying to get him on the hook for that. Could be wrong, but I don't know. What are your thoughts?
He probably also liked the free press.
And I was impressed when he first did it because I was like, okay, that's a really humanitarian thing to do. And by the way, Starlink it costs $750 million a year just running it in Ukraine. That's what it costs. That is no small amount of change for anybody. And Musk may have been at the time the richest man in the world. But let's not pretend like we can decide how he's going to spend his money and that he should go around burning it on all these things. But I thought it was a really great thing to do. But honestly, if instead of buying Twitter for $44 billion, he just said, I'm going to give Ukraine Starlink for free for 44 months, that would have made a lot of people in Ukraine and on Twitter a lot fucking happier. He seems to have messed up a lot of people's lives for the tune of $44 billion. But all right. So Commander, normally this is the point where I would... Oh, and we have a ding here. I do believe that is Starsky. So let us... yeah. And if I get him in, it'll take me a minute to get his camera on, but I do see him, and he does appear to be in the room. It's taking a second.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you just fine. Welcome, Starsky. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm fine, but my camera not so much because Starlink decided to kill me tonight. So.
All right, we'll leave your camera off. I think that's a great idea. Welcome, thank you. We were. Somebody had called. I love this. We reiterated this. Someone had called Elon Muscovite, which I thought was pretty clever. Before we do anything else, tonight you're going to be on a charity stream. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so tonight we'll be at the Enforcer stream together with Ukraine Matters and Denis Davidov, and hopefully we'll have some great time, so you are invited, of course. We'll be very happy to see you there.
I would absolutely love to. I plan on being there, and I would like to encourage everybody to go. And Doctors Without Borders is probably one of the most amazing organizations on the planet. This is an organization where they find the most dangerous places on Earth, the places where everyone else is fleeing, and they run headfirst into it. It's really quite amazing. So, all right. Well, thank you for that, and let's make sure, if I forget, please make sure to mention that one more time before the end of the show. But in case we lose you, I wanted to make sure we started with that. So, Starsky, welcome. So good to see you. Thank you so much for all your efforts to connect. I know it was a challenge, so we appreciate it. So, can you tell us what's been going on in Ukraine this week?
So, this week we. I'm not sure how to call it. What's the opposite word for celebration?
You'd think as a writer I'd have that at the tip of my head. Lance, the opposite for a somber
memorial?
mood. Memorial was the first thought that came to my mind, but certainly it was, yeah, let's say either a memorial or it was certainly a somber and depressing mood. There was a
something like that. So that word for the year of this invasion that happened exactly 1 year ago in Ukraine, and we were remembering everybody who lost their lives because of this invasion in Ukraine. And here in Hostomel specifically, because Hostomel was one of the first places, and my brigade actually was fighting Russians, and they were taking first combat in 2 different areas of Ukraine simultaneously, on the east and at the Hostomel near Kyiv. So we had quite some things to remember today. To my people, to Ukrainian, this month, February, stretched to the size of the year, because a lot of us still live in February last year, unfortunately, and. There were some great news for us from the United Nations, because General Assembly of the United Nations finally adopted the resolution condemning the Russian invasion in Ukraine and calling Russian troops to withdraw from the territory of Ukraine. Different countries were expressing their support for our country. Today, the Prime Minister of Spain visited Irpin and Bucha, and he also said that Ukraine is supported by his country. He said that Russia will never win this war because Spain stands with Ukrainian people. So we had mixed feelings. Of course, we still expect that maybe tonight Russians will perform some new terrorist act. Maybe it will be another missile strike on Ukraine, and the weather actually may support that, because it's raining in Kyiv right now, and if they launch their drones tonight, it will be harder to shoot them down. So we are prepared for any surprises that Russians can bring us tonight. And you know, the new year started, new year of resistance, new year of fighting. Ukrainians will continue fighting because we have no other choice. We don't want to die like people, like nation, like European nation. We don't want to die as a country, and we will never let it happen.
It's not a pleasant anniversary to celebrate. I think you've got a lot to be proud of, but I can only imagine the trauma. You did an interview on CBS News, and we'll be dropping the link to that shortly. In that interview, you talk about the battle, that first battle at I can't say it right now. Hostomel. Thank you. Hostomel. Thank you. So, and you talk about that, and I believe, if I recall, you had later said on your own live stream that some of the men who were there, who had been captured and returned, have since been lost. But also, there's been a lot of trauma, obviously, for everybody involved in having so many losses of their safety, their security, their friends and family, and their entire way of life has essentially been obliterated. So, but you had also, so I want to talk about that briefly without dwelling on it. And also, well, let's talk about that first, and then I'll ask you a question about Hostomel.
Yeah, sure.
Well, so, how has the way of life changed for Ukrainians now in 1 year out? I imagine it was very different a year ago. So you've been reflecting on that. What's changed?
We lost a lot of friends, and we lost a lot of people dear to us. That's probably the biggest change. A lot of people lost their home. A lot of people were forced to move out and find refuge in other countries. So I cannot say that this war, changed anything for better for Ukrainians. Sometimes in the commentaries, some people who don't really understand what happens in Ukraine, they say that I'm very, very biased because I'm not talking about all the beautiful things that Russian invaders brought to Ukraine, probably. Something like that. They always say that, I'm only showing information very, very one-sided. I don't know what should I say about Russians other than we all want them to either die or go away and forget about Ukraine forever. And one thing changed for Ukrainians for sure is that we found a lot of friends around the world. And if there can be anything positive about this year, it's the fact that we found a lot of friends and supporters, people who can feel our pain, people who can empathize what we feel here in Ukraine. people who support us, and a lot of brave people who come to Ukraine, even despite the fact that it's dangerous, that there's a danger of missile strikes and terrorist acts and shellings. People from around the world keep coming to Ukraine to express their support and help Ukrainians with anything they can. I think this is very important because not only they help us physically with their humanitarian aid, with their psychological aid, psychological relief, with all those goods that they bring to our civilians as well as our soldiers, but they also help us psychologically and morally, because to Ukrainians, seeing foreigners, physically seeing them, not only on a screen, but physically seeing them here in Ukraine, is a huge psychological relief and support. So despite all those horrors that we went through during this year, but still there's one good thing that happened this year, and it's meeting a lot of decent people from all around the world. That is important, and that's one of the most positive changes that I can talk about.
I've seen, and we've all experienced trauma. We've all been through trauma, and the only thing that I've sort of learned about trying to get through it myself is trying to remember the good that does come from it. And there's usually some good. It doesn't mean it was worth it. It doesn't mean would want it to have happened. But it sounds like Ukraine has found at least some positives that they can hold on to, and I'm impressed that you're holding on to it. So, and I'm very glad to. I'm glad my country is as much a part of that help as it is. I'm proud of that, and proud to be able to have these discussions with you. When you were talking with CBS News, and let me drop the link to that interview, you had mentioned something that I thought was interesting. The men captured at Hostomel had, when they were released, said that they were all asked one question, and it was the same question. What was the question they were all asked?
Why did you start shooting?
The defenders of Hostomel were asked by the invaders, "Why are you shooting at us?"
Yeah, it was crazy. And on the other hand, again, we found a lot of Russian documents. For example, during like first months of the invasion, we found a lot of documents, and those documents clearly showed that Russians planned just to roll their columns across Ukraine, taking control over cities without expecting any resistance whatsoever. So we basically have a proof that shows that Russians clearly believed in their own propaganda, in their own lies. And that was the reason why they lost so many orcs during first weeks, first months of the invasion. It was so amazing to see those columns just rolling to Ukraine without any sort of I don't know security awareness, nothing like that. And when they faced our troops, and when they were shelled and shot at, the only thought that we had was that nobody fights like that. You don't just roll into a country in columns, expecting like no resistance at all. You don't do that. Armies don't do like that. That's why they died. That's why a lot of them died here.
What sounds to me like it's very similar to the way the German forces, when they went into Austria, were in 38, which was, nobody's going to object. Everybody wants this. This is us restoring the homeland kind of thing. And I suspect that that's kind of the way this was put out to everybody in the Russian army, is that, you're going to be welcomed with bread and salt, and everything's going to be wonderful, and flowers for everybody, and a pretty girl in every corner. It's completely unrealistic assessment of what the situation was.
Absolutely. They had absolutely distorted picture of reality of what actually happens in Ukraine. They actually believed that Ukraine was ruled by a fascist regime of Jewish president, and like a small number of those fascist people were ruling oppressed and abused people of Ukraine. Obviously, because Russians have a problem understanding how democracy works, because our president was elected by a majority of Ukrainians, and they cannot really get it. I mean, so probably that was one of the reasons.
So what else?
They don't really understand how it feels to have a different president. That's the point.
or one that, whether you like him or not, actually represents, presumably, if when done correctly, the will of the people, and represents the will of the majority of people, all of whom have given into this system and believe that a president that was democratically elected, even if is not the one you voted for, is far preferable to a dictator.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of, let's say, supporters of the Russian terrorism, they say that, Zelensky was the worst choice ever, the worst man ever, and things like that. Like he's a true Nazi and things like that. They forget one thing. They forget that a lot of Russian propagandists, including Putin himself, were congratulating Zelensky with becoming a president, because back then in 2019, Zelensky has had this peaceful campaign. He attempted to peacefully and diplomatically resolve the war on the Donbass. And that's why they negotiated with Russians a lot, and that's why he wanted to show his peaceful intentions to Putin. And we all remember that as soon as Zelensky became a president, there was this huge prisoner exchange. It happened I think less than a month after his election. There was this huge prisoner exchange that he negotiated with Putin himself. And Putin was so happy that Zelensky became a president instead of the previous president. So a lot of people forget about it because, they gotta train their memory. I don't know, but that's the fact. He was very convenient president for Putin. He was very convenient representative of Ukraine, like diplomatic counterpart for Putin. So people should remind themselves about that. It only happened like 4 years ago. Not that many years passed since then, since that time.
Well, the assumption was, now he was a comedian. He was an actor on television and a comedy show. I think the assumption was, well, hey, great, it's nice that he wants to dabble in politics, but he's not going to be an effective president. Was that sort of a concern that was levied?
Could be, of course, because President Zelensky showed that he can learn very, very fast. Ukrainians have this thing. This is our, I would say, ethnic or national thing, that we can learn very fast. And when Zelensky became president, it took him just a small time to understand the situation, to when he received access to all those levels of the information, he started to understand what happens, and eventually he realized that you cannot negotiate with Putin. It makes absolutely no sense, because he doesn't keep his word. He will say, yes, we don't attack. Yes, we take our troops away and things like that. But he will do the opposite every single time, because he's a freaking KGB spy, and he acts accordingly.
So, what else has been going on in the last week in Ukraine?
So what else? We are expecting our first Leopard tanks very soon from Poland. We also expect our crews that received their training, and new vehicles, new weapons. Recently there was some terrible smoking incident in Mariupol, and Russians still cannot understand what happened. However, to us it's very, very clear they should stop smoking in wrong places, and they should stick to the safety rules. So currently they're trying to realize what could strike them so far away from the front lines. But it's a good sign for them that Ukraine can reach them much further than they expect.
We have a super chat, $34.99 New Zealand from Sam W. 3 hearts. Thank you so much for that. Again, that will be going to the 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐴 volunteer organization. The listing for that and all the information is in the description. So thank you for that. And I think they work directly with your unit. Is that correct, Starsky?
Yes, it's true. We met with those girls, and they said that they will make a separate account specifically to help our brigade, which is great, because we require a lot of drones, and we will be happy if you support this charity, because they're doing an amazing job. They're not only helping our brigade, but also other units of the armed forces of Ukraine. They constantly visit front lines and even dangerous places like Bakhmut, and bring equipment and uniforms and drones to the troops there, directly to the front lines. So they're doing an amazing job.
So they're the ones. So all the super chats, we're donating 100% to that organization, and we're doing it tagging Starsky in the when we send it. We're letting them know that it is care of Starsky, so they know, and it's going to be going directly to his brigade. So thank you very much for that super chat. And again, if you'd like to super chat, you do have to do it on in time. So we have 2 channels that are streaming this, and it's just because we're trying to build the other channel. Once it's to 1,000 subs, problem solved, and we'll stop doing this, and Titan will stop wanting to murder me in my sleep. Well, he'll find other reasons to want to murder me in my sleep. if you can go to Overtime, subscribe there. If we hit 1,000 subs, it makes our lives a lot easier. So we would appreciate that support as well. So the link to that is in the show. Titans dropped that once or twice. So thank you all for that. The President of the United States visited this week, I believe, as well. Is that not accurate?
Yes, it's true. We had an unplanned visit of President Biden. He visited Kiev, met our president, and actually at some point I thought that I should probably shave because, if he's in Kiev and he will be offered some kind of tour, then logically he will be here in Hostomel eventually. So I survived this small period of shock and prepared everything because, who knows? But he didn't visit Hostomel. Maybe another time. Maybe another time I will be able to show him my kit aircrafts and things like that. To Ukrainians, it was another sign of support, and we talked a lot about it. I think the next day he had his speech in Poland, and again, we were so much inspired by this huge support by the US, and even despite that little miserable protest action called Rage Against Ukraine, we didn't much even paid attention because we saw how the revolution of dignity looked like and how the real protest actions look like. That the one that happened in Washington, it was nothing. Trust me. Then there was this speech by President Biden in Poland, and at the same time, Putin tried to attempt some sort of speech in Mordor. Personally, I spent 2 hours of my life doing more important things than listening to Putin, because who cares what he says at all? People played bingo with what he said, because again, he was repeating basically all kinds of those propaganda stereotypes that they produced during these 9 years, and a lot of Ukrainians didn't watch him at all because we don't care. Our president recently said some very, very wise words. He said, "Putin is nobody." And we completely agree with him, because there's absolutely no sense in listening, watching what they produce at all. But we were very happy to see a speech by President Biden. It was very inspirational and very, I would say, strong. It was a strong speech.
All right, we have Commander Lance McMillan here, and I very much value his input, so I'd like to pass it off to him in a minute. I want to do two quick things before we do that. The first is we have a picture, because Zelensky is actually, this is the second American president that Zelensky has met. He also met President Trump. We have a picture of the meeting with President Trump and a picture of the meeting with President Biden. We will put both up at the same time. Lance knows what's coming. At the top there, you can see his meeting with Trump, and at the bottom, you can see his meeting with Biden.
If you look in the Oxford English Dictionary, the definition of stink eye includes that photograph with
and anybody who's familiar with the how and why of this, Zelensky was displeased. and for very good fucking reasons. This is its own story, and we covered this when it happened. So we can discuss that at some other point, but there is a marked difference in how each president handles a wide variety of things. The sovereignty of other friendly nations not being the least of them. We have 2 or 3 super chats. Thank you all very much for those super chats. Let's see, we've got Cheryl Waitley for a $9.99. Thank you very much, Cheryl. We appreciate that, and we will be passing that super chat along with the others. Along 500 Danish kroner, Slava Ukraine from more Mule. Thank you very much for that. Just FYI, again, these are all charity, but it actually also does help the channel because YouTube doesn't know what we do with the money or really care. So you're supporting our show as well just because it helps us in the algorithm. So thank you for supporting us. Thank you very much for allowing us to pass that on to the 𝐓𝐢𝐻𝐚𝐬 organization. So thank you all for that support. We appreciate it, and it makes it even more rewarding to do shows like this, which is already a blast with Starsky. They're kind of fun with Starsky, I have to admit. He's got a way of making stuff fun. So does Macmillan when he's not committing libel against the richest or second richest. We're not going to revisit that one. Garth McKeel, Canadian $5. Listening to this stream on a tugboat in a remote coastal British Columbia. Musk hasn't nerfed my Starlink yet. Well, don't worry, he will. Canadian $139.99, $140 Canadian from level 70. I hope this small amount helps. Well, level 70, you've been around. I've seen you on the shills. Let's not be too humble about this. You've donated to a great many times, and I think have been a great supporter of Starsky's and anyone who platforms Starsky. So it's great to see you as always, and thank you very much for all of that. And that said, let me pass this on to our own Commander Lance Macmillan. Commander, anything that you wanted to ask or discuss with Starsky?
Well, I love the opening comment of Biden's unplanned visit. I guarantee you this was not unplanned. It may have been a surprise, but the logistics that go into something like this would have been huge. But I'm glad that they did that. I think even if you just look at it from a purely symbolic standpoint, it has a profound impact, and I'm glad that he did that. I imagine he met with a great deal of initial pushback from his own security detail. I can't imagine it. Oh yeah, let's go right into the heart of the war zone.
And Secret Service details something I find fascinating, and because they will, under some circumstances, basically override the will of the President of the United States. But you're taking a huge risk when you do that, because he is the Commander-in-Chief. And so I can't imagine being in charge, because I have to believe, I think I told you this, that his Secret Service said, no, sir, you're not going anyway.
Well, I'm sure that's how it started. And it rapidly evolved to a, yes, sir, whatever you say, sir. But, yeah.
Yeah, but it was very symbolic. I agree on that, yes. And of course, to us, it's not a frequent occasion to see the President of the United States visiting Ukraine, as well as other presidents visiting Ukraine, because we have a war. And again, I would like to just briefly mention, those supporters of the Russian terrorism, people who never visited Ukraine in their lives.
Yeah.
And they can only like project what they feel while sitting at the best observation point in the world, which is their sofas. And at the same time, different presidents, different prime ministers, different politicians, different organizations, including religious organizations, keep coming to Ukraine, keep helping us, because it's very easy to realize what happens when you visit places like Borodyanka, like Moshchun, Bucha, and you see yourself that there can be absolutely no reason, no justification for Russia to invade Ukraine. There can be no justification for their crimes and all of the things they did. So yeah, I think that President Biden is truly a brave president. I can say heroic, because only brave people can visit Ukraine. And on the other hand, I'm so glad that the world is full of brave people.
I particularly like the reciprocity aspect, because Zelensky came to D.C., and that had to have been enormously complicated and potentially risky to do in the middle of a war for the leader of Ukraine to come to the U.S. And I like the fact that shortly thereafter, you have Biden doing the same thing, coming to Ukraine to show his support. I really like that. That's very, very powerful symbolism when you look at it from that perspective.
There is another thing, because as soon as President Biden arrived to Ukraine, Russian propagandists had their show on the Russian national TV, where they claimed that they gave President Biden security guarantees, because even the wind doesn't blow without Kremlin's permission. You see.
Oh, brother. Yep. The shit just keeps on rising every time they open their mouths. Oh, brother. So on a more practical point, we know that we're on the verge of getting some of the new weapon systems that have been promised start showing up at the front. We know that the crews for those new weapon systems are completing their training and such. I don't want to, venture into speculation on what military operations that would involve, but I think it's just interesting to consider the possibilities of one of two ways that these might get employed. One is to husband these until they're all in place to put together a very powerful striking force, which would then kick off presumably a Ukrainian spring offensive or something, or to divide them up and assign smaller packets of these new pieces of equipment to units at the front to try to stabilize things. And the reason I find that interesting is because we keep getting conflicting reports of what's going on at the front right now. Some elements tend to show that the Russians are making progress, albeit at horrendous cost. And others are saying that the cost is still there, but they're not making progress. So it's, I think, interesting in a question of how those might end up being deployed. So I'm waiting with a great deal of anticipation to see what develops over the next couple of months.
Actually, it's a very easy question because we talked about it a lot already here in Ukraine. Currently, assault brigades are being formed in Ukraine, including my brigade. And there will be a bunch of assault brigades in the National Guard of Ukraine. There will be new brigades created in the armed forces of Ukraine, as well as the police. There will be some specific assault units created in the police force. Obviously, we're talking about counter-terrorist units. And those will be used to deoccupy the Russian-controlled territories of Ukraine. Actually, it's not a secret. We're talking about it for quite a while here in Ukraine, in our informational field. Personally, I have like 2 interviews a day regarding this.
Oh, yeah.
All of those vehicles and tanks and weapons coming to Ukraine soon, they will be used to form those brigades, to equip those assault brigades with Bradleys, with Leopard tanks, and then they will be used to deoccupy territories. The units that currently defend their positions at the front lines, I think that they will have a chance to rotate when our counter offensive starts, and we anticipate to start this counter offensive in spring. I think we're talking about the late March. Late March, early April. Yeah, very early, but because even our president talks about it a lot, I think that he has reasons to say that.
Your brigade got a code word under this new organization, is that right? Or code name?
Yes, we received a new code name. We are called, in English it sounds like the Frontier, but in Ukrainian it's called Rubizh. And Rubizh obviously is because of Rubizhne, our experience in defending that town that we defended for 4 months during basically spring and summer last year. It was a truly heroic defense because at that time Russians had full advantage in terms of their artillery and their tanks, and they were just bringing a lot of Kadyrovites and their special forces troops to the front lines, trying to take Rubizhne and Severodonetsk. But they were losing a lot of men in combat with our troops, specifically with my guys. And we can talk about the number of losses that my brigade and Russians took in Rubizhne. So, for example, according to the reports, according to video footage from Rubizhne and reports of our commanders of platoons and companies, Russians lost around 1,000 men in contact combat on the streets, basically. At the same time, they lost unknown number of men due to our artillery and due to our airstrikes. At the same time, my brigade lost 50 men, and we had quite a large number of wounded people, around 300 wounded. But you cannot literally compare those losses to the Russian losses. And unfortunately, some of the units that were with us at the front lines, they had they took some losses as well. We know that one of the units that was stationed there, I mean, it's bad to compare us to them, of course, but they lost 1,000 men dead and wounded, which means I think around 300, judging from the amount of dead and wounded we usually have, which is like one killed in action versus 5, 6, 8 wounded. So I assume that they could have lost around 300 men, and they could have lost around 600-700 men wounded. But my brigade lost 50 men.
Yeah, and I want to point something out, and this stands in stark contrast. The casualty rate, which is the total number of killed and wounded, your forces tend to have a much higher wounded component than the Russian ones. A far larger number of Russians die. And I think that speaks volumes as to the amount of effort your Ukrainian forces invest in medical evacuation and medical care close to the front lines to save people, as opposed to the Russians, where it's like, okay, he got hit, just let him die out there in the cold, who cares?
I can confirm that. In 2021, we had this military training mission Unifier, the Canadian mission that trained our guys. And they trained our medics, and then they trained all of our infantry, each infantryman, in terms of combat medicine. And second thing was basically urban combat. So we've been we were trained in this field for couple of months, I think. Mm-hmm. And later we went on a mutual military exercise called Rapid Trident, involving different NATO countries, NATO armies, and we have quite a huge experience in this. Also, because we have this new structure of our staff, our headquarters of brigade and units according to NATO standards, we have big personnel of instructors within each unit, each battalion, within headquarters of our brigade. We have those instructors that can share their experience in terms of combat medicine. We have constant training for everybody, basically, for our infantrymen, our officers, our staff officers are being trained also very frequently. So I think this is the answer, because comparing to even other Ukrainian units, my unit took not as impressive losses as they did.
Yeah, makes sense.
So we had a couple of questions, and I keep reaching for the headset. I think this is probably like the first show I've ever done without the headset. I mean, I've done at least 300, 400 shows, and I miss my headset, man. I'm feeling lost. I need the props, too. I'm just kind of like, I need to be fidgeting with something. I'm going to start getting anxiety. So we had a couple questions, another super chat. So Colleen asked, and I wanted to know about this, and this is, I think, for both of you. We'll start with Starsky. What's going on in Bakhmut? We know that that's been an area of very high contention for a while, so she wanted an update, and I think that's a good question.
The situation didn't change much. I can say that Russians keep attempting their numerous attacks every day. And so far, all of those attacks are being deflected, specifically in the area of responsibility of my units, of my brigade. That's the picture. So Russians trying to throw more and more men, and they have multiple attacks every day. But one thing that we noticed is that they don't have, let's say, as much artillery support and as much support from the armored vehicles and tanks as previously. This support, let's say, is decreasing every day. So we can see that they're trying to throw more and more men, more infantry, but at the same time they involve less and less tanks and armored vehicles. So that's the reason why all of those attacks are not successful.
Commander, thoughts on Bakhmut?
The maps that I've been seeing, which are from a number of different sources, but are all generally in agreement, make it appear that the Russians are trying to encircle Bakhmut. The troops in Bakhmut proper seem to be holding their ground quite well, but the flanks are very gradually collapsing inwards. And if the situation gets bad enough, I suspect that the Ukrainian forces may end up having to conduct a withdrawal rather than sacrifice all the troops in there for no purpose. But at the same time, if I were looking for a localized counterattack to stabilize the situation, it would be against the wings of the Russian forces that are threatening to encircle the city. I think Bakhmut is a great example of attritional warfare being used to the advantage of the defender. The Ukrainians are literally bleeding the Russian army white. They're down to the point where not only have they exhausted many of the 𝐒𝐬𝐿s and many of the troops that Wagner Group recruited out of the prisons. Those are pretty much, it appears to be gone at this point. They're now actually throwing the few remaining units they have that are of decent quality into that fight, and those are getting slaughtered as well. So if you were trying to set your situation up for a good counteroffensive to develop in the spring sometime, as Starsky alluded to, possibly as early as March, that would be the way to do it. But you have to put yourself in a position where you're also suffering substantial losses to achieve that level of attrition to enable that big offensive to succeed.
Yes, currently we're talking about a physical elimination of Russian personnel.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, because that's, let's say, one of the most important goals that we have is to just physically eliminate Russian personnel. And that is something that we use as a message while advertising our assault brigades. On the Ukrainian TV and radio, we're saying that the only way to have this retaliation for everything that Russians did is to take weapons, take a rifle, and physically kill them. That's the only way. So I think that it's let's say it's reasonable because we realize that Russians can bring more and more men, and they will not just disappear. So we have to be prepared for this long and hard work that will consist of physically eliminating Russian terrorists wherever they are.
Yep. It's an ugly form of warfare, but it's a necessary precursor to enabling successful offensive efforts.
Yes.
All right, we have a Canadian 1399 from level 70. Starsky, do you know what the casualty ratio is between Ukraine and Russia? Some sources say Ukraine has as high as 100,000 versus 1,800,000 for that's not 1,800. Sorry, 180,000 for the Russians. Seems off to me. So. Yeah, I'd like to get Starsky's take on that. The question was directed at him, but I am going to ask the commander a follow-up. So please, Starsky.
I know only the official numbers that are published by our general staff. So basically, I base my expertise, so-called, on the reports of the general staff. And according to the general staff of Ukraine, Russians lost 46. What was the most recent?
Yeah, the last I heard was 144, but that I'm been out of touch for about 2 weeks. So.
Yes, and I can tell you this: officers in the general staff are very, very busy every night, because when our civilian people go to sleep, those officers, and there's a big department that analyzes all the footage, all the reports, and they're basically counting Russian bodies. So it's a tough job. I think they deserve our, I don't know, they deserve a beer sometime. So as for Ukrainian losses, I noticed that the rate is something like 1 Ukrainian versus 8 Russians. The rate of those casualties. So we can count, basically. It's about 1 Ukrainian versus 7 or 8 Russians.
So, Commander, we've heard a lot of different numbers for the losses for Russia, and I want to try to speculate on that for a minute, because I know you love it when I ask you to speculate. I will say, yeah, the Moscow Times came out 2 weeks ago and admitted that Russia had in fact lost as many as 10,000 people in 1 year of fighting in Ukraine. I will tell you, I find that number slightly suspect. I know they do propaganda, but wow! So that's
yeah,
that may have been loud in the mic there, but that was so. You've been watching this from the beginning.
Yeah,
it's tough.
So I'll say this. I think that let's round upwards. Let's call it 150,000 dead Russians. I don't want to say it's a deceptive number, but the Russians are using what I might call creative accounting on this. As we've gone over several times, the Russian army that the Ukrainians are fighting is actually 5 separate armies. And if you only account for one of those 5, then the numbers in question may approach what we're talking about from the Moscow standpoint. Now, for those of your audience who haven't monitored or followed our discussions, I'll go over real quickly. The 5 Russian armies are the regular Russian army, the MVD, which is their Ministry of the Interior, which has security troops, which are not necessarily trained for combat operations, but certainly are equipped and are being committed to the fighting here. Then you have the Wagner Group and other private military corporations. That's a separate group. Then you have what we call the Kadirites, who are kind of National Guards for the semi-autonomous regions within Russia. And they're not technically part of the army. They're a separate personal militia aligned with the owner or the rulers of those particular autonomous regions. And then finally, you have the breakaway oblasts of Luhansk and Donetsk. And those are treated for accounting purposes as a separate entity. And we know that a very large number of the casualties are coming from that latter group, but the casualties are spread across all 5 groups. Now, if you very selectively cherry pick just one group, which supposedly would have suffered the fewest casualties, and you say, oh, we've only suffered this many casualties, there's a tiny element of truth to that. But I think overall, I think the 150 rough number is probably much closer to the truth. And then
let's clarify. Just real quick, 150 dead. So not casualties, 150
that's dead. That's not casualties.
Okay.
That's pushing up sunflowers in a Ukrainian field somewhere.
All right.
And if you use the standard military rubric of about 3-to-1 casualty ratio, so for every dead guy, you got 3 guys who are wounded or missing, that pushes total Russian casualties in the war so far up over 500,000.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Gaming with Robin.
I have
yes, please.
I have a theory, not like a theory, but rather an observation. What I noticed basically from the beginning of the war, like when when we already had this number of 5,000 Russians dead, and Russians were talking about like 500. So there were 5,000 Russians dead, and Russians were talking about 500 dead. And it was early. It was, I think, in like April, maybe.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe earlier. And then Russians were talking about 2,500 Ukrainians. Ukrainian National Guardsmen killed by Russian paratroopers in Hostomel.
Just in Hostomel.
Meaning us. Yeah, meaning my brigade. While we only had like around 200 men. So, and it was like that during the year. So they would just either add 0 to the numbers, or remove 0 from the number. And my observation is that that's basically what they do. They either multiply by 10 when it comes to... They have exact numbers, or not exact, but very, very close to the truth. They have some more or less precise numbers regarding their losses, regarding our losses. But what they do is they just primitively either multiply by 10 if they're talking about Ukrainians, if they're talking about destroyed HIMARS systems and things like that, destroyed drones, because when they were talking about tanks, you remember that they literally destroyed twice as much tanks that we physically had in Ukraine. But usually it's like they either multiply by 10 or they divide by 10. And if they're talking about 10,000 dead, then probably this number of 140,000 is more or less precise. So when they start talking about 300, 400,000 Ukrainians dead, then we can just divide by 10, and we will know the approximate number of the real casualties.
Sure, but there's two other elements at play here, and the first one, we saw this occur in World War II, for example, where the bomber raids that we would send over Germany, and people would come back and everybody was claiming, oh yeah, I shot down 3 Messerschmitts and 4 Focke-Wulfs or whatever. And the guys who were recording the data of, oh, how many planes we shoot down, and they tally this up, and they were kind of going, there's no way in hell we shot down 500 German airplanes today. So they kind of go back and start doing analysis, and they found that the numbers were inflated in some cases by over 20 times the actual number. And it wasn't that people were deliberately lying. It's because in the heat of combat, everybody would see a different thing and interpret it a different way. So often, one fighter would come in to attack the bombers, and every guy who was manning, a turret or a gun that faced in the direction of those fighters coming in would shoot at it, and they'd all see it, catch fire and go down, and every one of them would say, I shot it down. Because to their mind, that's what had happened. And it took a lot of additional analysis to figure out what was going on. So for the Russians, it may well be this, and I'm trying to give credit where probably isn't due, but nonetheless.
Charity, maximum charity, yeah.
Yeah, okay, charity. But it might be that, Ivan and Pyotr have both reported, oh yeah, I destroyed a Ukrainian T-72, when in fact only one of them hit the thing, and it didn't destroy it. It, blew off a track or the rear bumper on the thing. And so the numbers get inflated, but what they're doing is at the higher headquarters level, where they should be tracking that downwards, what they're doing is instead just letting those numbers stand because it looks better for PR purposes. So that theoretically could be what's going on. I don't think it is, but in theory it could. I'm trying to do fairness here.
No,
So,
I completely
please.
agree. Yeah.
You please.
Yeah, I completely agree, because some years ago, we were laughing at. There was like a bunch of stories, and it was all over the internet about those Russian authorities trying to fix roads in some Russian city, for example, Omsk. Okay, and they were like the subcontractors who finished those roads because they stole a lot of money during repair works. They could not do like all the range of repairs. That's why instead of 30% of the roads of the asphalt that they had to repair, they only repaired 10, but they reported that they repaired 30. And then the chief that was responsible for the subcontractor, he reported to his chief that they repaired 50% because they just rounded up like.
You cut out.
Yeah, hopefully he'll be back in a
So
second. Yeah.
Sure. And the other element I wanted to talk about is in terms of reporting Russian
Like,
casualties.
hello.
Oh,
Hello?
yeah, we lost you there for a sec.
Yeah. So all of those people responsible for this, they would add like 5-10% here and there, and in the end, the chief of the Russian region, the governor, would report to his citizens that 90% of the roads in Omsk were repaired, while in reality it was like only 10%. And we were laughing, we were like analyzing all that stuff. So it could happen, definitely, but just trying to give a logical explanation to what Russia produces in their media, it's a very hard task. Let's call it this way.
I do want to hear what Macmillan has to say, but I want to interrupt and say two quick things because one's a correction. Well, first of all, one point that's worth mentioning about all of this is there's going to be these kinds of errors on either side, whether the side lies or not. And I think the point here is they're lying on top of that, but part of the miscalculation is in fact those numbers. Titan pointed out, because I had mentioned about the Moscow Times, and Titan checked. Moscow Times is run from Amsterdam and generally has highly factual. I've cited them before, and they tend to be, but that was in fact their 10,000 confirmed dead as of 2 weeks ago. And they in the story they say confirmed dead. So if you're talking confirmed from Russia or from Moscow itself, then they're completely correct. The Moscow Times, it's been a while since I've looked into them. They usually seem to be pretty accurate, but having said that, I think they're limited in what they can say and do unless they're completely out of Amsterdam. I don't know. I should look into it, but thank you for the correction. You were going to say, Macmillan.
Yeah, that's actually a great segue. So Russian reporting, and it's maybe they're only talking about confirmed deaths. And we know that there's actually almost a built-in incentive for commanders and for the Russian system to underreport casualties, because if you confirm a casualty, then you have to pay out death benefits. And we're talking about a government that's already enormously cash-strapped because of all the sanctions and such. And this is also a military that we know went into this offensive with mobile crematoria accompanying the assault forces. Those weren't to be, burn Ukrainian bodies. Those were to burn Russian bodies to hide the casualties from their own people. And then you can simply say, oh, I'm sorry, Ivan and Pyotr, they didn't get killed in action. They simply deserted. So all of this adds up together to a definite effort to hide the actual numbers, not just from the international community, but also from a domestic audience for purely economic reasons.
Yeah, it seems plausible to me.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to do, and I saw it's coming up in the scroll on the chat side, we do need to talk about this, is what's going on in Moldova and Transnistria right now.
So we know that Prime Minister of Moldova said that that they need to deoccupy Transnistria, meaning that Russian troops have to leave. Currently, Russians are trying to pump up some kind of hysteria around Transnistria. So at this point, we are observing what happens, because there were like multiple panicking reports from Russians regarding that Ukrainian troops are gathering at the border with Moldova, basically, and they're preparing to attack and things like that. So currently we're observing probably Russians can create some provocation, or things like that. But they already made this message where they mentioned that, and again, it was really funny because they mentioned that any attempt of attacking Russian troops at the territory of Transnistria will be considered as attack against Russia. And I don't understand what they mean, like what their actions will be. Will they attack Ukraine or something? Nobody knows.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wonder at the okay, so how are the Russian troops that are in Transnistria going to leave? Where are they going to go? I mean, you have to either go through Romania or you have to go through Ukraine to get these Russian troops back to Russia, neither of which seem particularly practical to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's an interesting situation, pretty much.
Yeah. So it's you're saying you think it's more of a distraction than an actual. They're trying to do something there.
Currently we only can absorb that because I know that this situation gave birth to like 100 memes in Ukrainian Telegram channels already. And at this point we can only observe what happens there because we don't have any details. On the other hand, of course, let's say taking that small army of Russians that are locked in Transnistria basically for a year already, I think that taking them as prisoners looks very seducing to me, actually.
Okay.
All right, we have a couple of questions in super chats I want to get to. We did have a question from Tindra a while back. Where is the commander's dog? I told you, we're going to have to do a show just the two of you bringing up your dogs. Just put the dog up on the camera and let
me see if I can orient the camera. Try not to get seasick when I do this. We'll see if we can get Mr. Smiley. There's the big guy. He's resting. The other two are outside in the snow. With Malamutes, what do you expect? It's snow. It's the greatest thing in the world. We're going to roll in it all day long if we can.
Oh, my dog too. Every time it's like he's never seen it before. €6 from Gaming with Robin. According to the latest statistics from Defense of Ukraine on the Birdie app, it's the official Defense of Ukraine account. The losses are 146,820 casualties as of 9 hours ago on the Ukrainian side. Thank you very much for that information. Gaming with Robin, that was right in the middle of that conversation. We obviously got I got a little behind on it. And we did get another super chat, and I'm having a hard time finding it. So while I look for that, we were also asked, Starsky, what is your opinion on Poroshenko?
What's my opinion on Poroshenko? Well, he was democratically elected by people, and I cannot criticize my people for their choice. So my opinion on Poroshenko is absolutely the same as my opinion on Zelensky. They were both democratically elected, and they did what they could. There are questions questions can be asked, to anybody, including myself. I have more questions to Yanukovych actually than to Poroshenko or Zelensky. So Until Ukrainian presidents are democratically elected without all that falsificational bullshit that we saw in the years prior to the Revolution of Dignity. Until then, I will respect the choice of my people. That's all I can say.
The president has won 106% of the vote.
And let's see, we had another super chat, and I may have, of course, I ended up moving that. That was, is one thing or another. Titan sent me some footage that I'd like to bring up because I think you guys will find that interesting. But of course, while I'm doing that, you end up too many monitors, you miss the other super chat. It was level 70, 13.99 Canadian. The Russians seem concerned that Ukraine is building up forces near Transnistria, which I actually don't know what that is. Any sort of truth to this? Seems like Moldova is planning to kick the Russians out.
I think he means Transnistria.
I think you are correct. So I don't know. I don't know enough to accurately even relay the question, let alone answer it.
Well, we just talked about that, but for people who don't know what we were talking about, it occurs to me that we should have perhaps given a slightly clearer description. Moldova is a country that sits between Romania and Ukraine. It's just a sliver of a country that is basically on the river down there. And I'm not sure exactly when it started, but there was a kind of like Luhansk and Donetsk, there was a region of Moldova that broke away and declared itself independent because they were ethnic Russians who spoke Russian and they felt they were being oppressed. And the Russians sent in, I think it's a reinforced battalion of security troops to act as peacekeepers and preserve, the status quo and tranquility in the region. That's what we're talking about. So since the war has broken out between Ukraine and Russia, this group in Transnistria, which is the breakaway little republic down there, and the Russian peacekeepers that are there, they've been completely isolated, surrounded by countries that don't like them. So it's a tense situation, and the Russians are now, it appears, trying to do something to, we'll call it, open a second front down on that side of the Ukrainian border. There was a lot of rumors that they were trying to stage a coup. The prime minister resigned, and basically saying she didn't want to, be in power and didn't feel that she was qualified to handle a situation that might erupt into a conflict. And the situation has been volatile since then. And that's what we were just talking about. Is it a real threat to Ukraine? Is it just a thing that the Russians are doing to distract people? It's hard to say at this point.
Thank you. I think I got a little distracted, so it's partly my fault. You already answered the question, so thank you. So what I'd like to do is start wrapping things up. You'll find all of our information, especially we're following Bakhmut very closely, and a number of other things. So come join us on the Discord. We discuss this. We discuss a number of other things. But right now, Ukraine, and we've had this Discord for a while, well before the war, but this is now just something that we spend a lot of time on for obvious reasons. So we hope you'll come join us and check that out. And you can also ask Commander McMillan questions. He's on our Discord and has just been wonderful with answering questions. I also do want to make sure I hit up Starsky so that he talks a little bit about, once again, what he's doing tonight for people who've just joined us and who have missed that, because I think that's important, so we'll cover that one in a second. But thank you all, and if you haven't yet gone, just hit like and subscribe, really on both channels. We'd appreciate it. But definitely, there's a link in the description. We're simulcasting on our second channel. We're just trying to get that to 1,000 subs, and we're trying to get that as quickly as possible. It's going to make our lives a lot easier, and that way we can give people the content they want. And if they don't want the content from both the news and the interviews, they can just pick and choose. Makes everybody's life a lot easier, but it's hard to do until we get to 1,000. So we appreciate that support. Thank you all for your super chats. Again, that's going to the 𝐓𝐢𝐻𝐚𝐬 volunteering organization that is down at the bottom. Operator Starsky, I just got this from Titan. You may or may not have heard about this, but in Warsaw, Poland, a number of people thought that perhaps Russians should get a better idea of what is going on in Ukraine, and so they woke Russian diplomats to the sound of air raid sirens. This is, and let's see, that did not come out very well at all. So let's put that in the center here, and here we go. So that is Russian diplomats in Warsaw at 6 a.m. this morning being awoken to air raid sirens, care of protesters. Nice to see giving them a little pushback there. So thank you all for that. So Starsky, could you give us a rundown of a couple of different shows that you're doing, and then we'll end with what you're going to be doing tonight.
Yeah, so tomorrow we are with the chills at around 10 p.m. Kyiv time. And tonight we will join. Oh my God, that's a big dog. Tonight we will join the Enforcers stream together with other bloggers like Ukraine Matters, like Denis Davidov, and they are basically my buddies. So it will be a great stream, and we will be fundraising for Doctors Without Borders, one of the most kick-ass organizations. There's a lot of dogs.
Yes, three Malamutes, and the big one is very big.
Yeah. So looking forward to see you there tonight with us.
I look forward to it. I will certainly be down there. I hope everyone listening to this will join. Obviously, I think it's a great way to both show your support for Ukraine and for the people who are discussing it and getting the word out, but also to support one of the most incredible organizations on the planet, Doctors Without Borders. Any final thoughts? Anything I missed? Either of you before we go?
Other than to apologize for having to play dog herder. I had one outside who was trying to break through the window because it was time to come in, Dad. Time to come in. So.
Well, it's been my experience. So Fooch has his own following, and it looks like your dogs are starting to get their own fan base. I'm not kidding. I told you that before we started the show. People really like, and your dogs were asked about during the show. It's in the line.
No.
So I wasn't. They asked. Okay.
Well, the big fellow's outside sulking in the snow now. So.
Yeah, actually, tonight we had some oh my God, reconnaissance operation done together with 𝐓𝐢𝐻𝐚𝐬, because 𝐓𝐢𝐻𝐚𝐬 started barking for some reason, and I had to take my rifle and go assess the perimeter, and everything was clear. Probably he felt some kind of danger. Probably he had a bad dream. I don't know. but it's always great to have dog in the house, and dogs are our best friends. We spent thousands of years sharing same homes, same food together, and unlike cats, dogs respect people, and they always look forward to play with us and spend time with us. So basically we're like the same tribe with them. So yeah, if you like dogs, give us a thumbs up, and yeah, if you don't, I don't want to talk to you at all.
Or let a mod know, and they will make sure you're not permitted to return to the channel. Well, in fact, a subtle knife just said never apologize for dog content. So I think you're in the clear, Commander. Operator, we look forward to seeing you tonight, and also on the shills. I think both Commander and I will try to make the shills tomorrow. That would be 3 p.m. Eastern time for those of you in the U.S. The shills is always a lot of fun, so I look forward to going there tomorrow. And for giving Dick a piece of my mind for my microphone issues, which is really not his fault, but I'm going to blame him anyway. So thank you very much for joining us, and we really look forward to, at a minimum, also seeing you next week, and thank you for your heroic efforts to connect to the show today. I know it was a challenge, and we're really glad you came, so thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, see you all on the tonight. On the Enforcer channel. Again, we'll be dropping a link to that, and I'll update the description so that's there, because I want people to be able to find it. Shills tomorrow, and Operator Starsky with us next week. Have a great rest of your day and a good weekend all. Thank you.